What is up, everybody? It is Thursday here in Korea. Thursday evening. It's about 8 o'clock. I'm only 11 minutes late today, and we are continuing on with this Seoulweaver show. The culmination. I'm actually streaming to a few different places new today, so just real briefly to let you guys know, Seoulweaver is my little corner of the internet where I share information about life in Korea. And if you're tuning in on Twitch or Periscope, this is the first time I've streamed in that direction. But I do that via my podcast, social media outlets, my vlog, and my blog back in the day, to be completely honest, and my website. All that's going to be in the description. But I'm starting to do that now in a way that kind of combines all the things I wanted to do in a single show where I broadcast live. Now I'm trying to get things figured out. The audio should be good, but the video may be stuttering a lot. We are actually doing, or I am actually doing, like pre-episodes before I launch next month, but it's going to be every Thursday at 8 o'clock p.m. Korea Standard Time. Now, I'm actually calling these Prepisodes. I just came up with that right now. I'm actually a little impressed with that. I'm proud of it, man. I'm like, oh man, where did that come from? That was missing in like a lot of the pre stuff. In any case, I'm Will Brooks, coming to you from right smack dab in the middle of Seoul, Korea, live with the Seoulweaver podcast. I've been here for a long time, and today I'm going to get into that. I'm going to actually chime in for the podcast. I'm actually going to chime in with what brought me to Korea, the who, what, when, where, and why, and what brought me over here so many moons ago. And I'm also going to get into, that's all I'm going to get into in the podcast. I'm just going to kind of go over that really quickly. These are the questions that'll be similar to what I'll be asking people during the interview in future podcasts once the actual launch happens. Quick heads up, though, I am on a solo mission producing my own show. So you'll see me bouncing. You'll see my eyes bouncing around a lot, just in preparation of getting things done. My apologies for that, but I don't know who you don't need me to look directly at you, right? So in addition to going over what brought me to Korea and that whole story, we'll also be doing current events. And what do we got for current events today? Let's jump on there. It's all stuff that I just put together and I know very well, but we'll be talking about, of course, we'll be talking about North Korea. That's like a recurring topic here, of course, because we are so close to North Korea. Living here in Seoul, we're in basically a stone's throw away from North Korea. So all the tension is really, hits close to home for us. We had a lot of stress about the tension, particularly this week. Just because, rumors were circulating and things along those lines. So that was eventful. And we will touch on President Trump's comments at the UN, of course. We'll also touch on China and their role in this, specifically what their take is for THAAD, a U.S. weapon here that's being deployed. Well, a U.S. weapon that's been deployed here in South Korea. And we'll get into that later. And we'll also talk about the emerging, we'll talk a little bit about academia and what's going on in academics with mixed children here in Korea, multicultural children here in Korea. We'll talk a little bit about English, and we'll talk a little bit about the alt-right, or what's being labeled as the alt-right movement here in Korea. Excuse me. I'm going to put that behind me. So, we'll do all that more and more. And lastly, we'll finish up with the far less formal half. Not that any of this is formal, but we'll finish up with the informal half where we'll talk about, a trip that I took this weekend that was really enjoyable that I want to share with you guys. And with some people who will eventually be on the show. I'll eventually have interviews going on. And these are two guys. This is a company called or an organization called the Seoul Company, where they teach you how to mix makgeolli and make makgeolli, brew makgeolli. They'll probably be upset that I said mix makgeolli like that, but they're pretty cool. They took us on a nice little trip. We went on a tour this weekend, and I want to kind of talk about that with you guys. Normally, I finish up with some social media posts and some events. I didn't get those today. I went through the events. There's very little going on this weekend. So if you actually know of stuff, be sure to hit me up either on the Seoulweaver's Facebook page or the Seoulweaver's Facebook group, or leave it in the comments here in this video. This is actually going to go through. And eventually what I'm going to do is go through and what the goal is in the future is to come through, chop these episodes up, or chop little parts of these long videos up and put those little topics as separate videos on YouTube. So for those of you who don't want to witness like the live version of it, who don't have the time, because it's going to be probably an hour long, you can just chime in or you can just tune into the Seoulweaver YouTube page and check me out there. So be sure to do that. So for today, let's go ahead and get into what brought me to Korea and when. So I came to Korea quite a long time ago. I actually initially came to Korea in 2001. And what had happened was I joined the Army. What had happened was, it feels like I need to explain. I joined the Army, man. I joined the Army when I was 19 years old. And I had tried to kind of make things work, find a way to go to school and configure things or go to school and work my way through school at the same time. And I was having a really hard time doing that. And the reason I feel the need to explain that, I mean, that's got nothing to do with Korea, but the reason I feel the need to explain that is because sometimes, because of the bad press that the Army gets sometimes from, soldiers just being soldiers and kids being away from home the first time and things like that, is I want people to kind of realize what different things make people join the Army. We're not all hard-headed idiots, alcoholics all the time. Not the whole time, man. We may start off that way. I've got a few incidents that I can think of that I didn't portray myself in the best light, in the past. But the thing is, people who join the Army are really just trying to make a way for themselves because they screwed off all their time in high school. They just didn't plan things out. And there's some people who join the Army because for other reasons, their family, it's in their family, it's in their community a lot more. But for me, I was trying to make it through school and I couldn't. It just wasn't possible to do that. I mean, to go to school full time and work my way through or work a job where I made enough money to actually pay for my school. So that's kind of the backdrop of what made me join the Army. What made me come to Korea is kind of weird. I didn't have the plan to come to Korea. When I joined the Army, I was like, I'm just going to go wherever they send me. And this is 2000, the year 2000. This is before September 11th. So you didn't really have that much to be concerned about. You weren't like worried about being shipped off to war just yet. So the reason Korea wasn't even on my radar, again, this is the year 2000, like K-pop wasn't a thing, K-drama wasn't a thing. You knew a lot of Korean people, but you knew a lot of Korean Americans because I'm from Southern California, the deserts of Southern California. You got this huge Koreatown in LA, and the Korean population in Southern California is pretty large. So I knew of Korea. I knew a lot of places, but I didn't even really distinguish between North and South or what was going on there. It just wasn't on my radar. And I try to say that because the people that come over to Korea now, like the expats that come over here now, Korea's been on their radar for like 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 years even. And they've been paying attention to Korean K-drama, K-pop. They got like their idols and things, and they've been studying a little bit of Korean. So they come into the country like excited about coming here. To me, the Army was sending me here on a hardship tour only so I could go to Hawaii next. And that was the promise that the recruiter told me. He said, hey, go to Korea now. And it was 3 of us that actually joined together. Go to Korea now. You can come, you get there, do a year, and they'll count that as a hardship tour. You can go wherever you want after that. So yeah, that was the plan, to come to Korea for 1 year, and then leave and go to Hawaii. I didn't leave for a long time, and it was like an extensive period of time. I stayed here for 9 years after that, maybe almost made it to 10. But I was really nervous about coming over, obviously, because you're coming to going overseas to a different country you never heard of before. And I was super uncomfortable. Well, the feedback or the information I got about Korea was not all that great. And let me kind of explain. Like, the people that were telling me about Korea hadn't been here. Like one of the guy that gave me the most information, he was stationed up in camp in Chuncheon in like 1986. My uncle was stationed here in 1979 down in Pyeongtaek. And then some of the other guys that were stationed over here, they were just giving me these horror stories like, don't leave your clothes out on the line because people will steal them, they'll take them, and you can get, they were giving me all these bad things that were happening, but all these good things that were because of the broken economy at the same time. And quite honestly, like they were saying, you can buy things with a candy bar, you can trade candy bar for X amount of dollars. Their won rate, their money is a lot cheaper than ours. So you give them $1, they'll give you like 3 or 4 of theirs back. And I'm sure at some point in time that was the case. I mean, prior to, and there's a few key moments in Korea's history. There's 1988 when the Olympics came to Korea. Like that transformed Korea a lot, and I think it transformed Seoul a lot. And then there's there's World Cup. I witnessed World Cup form Korea to a certain degree. And then there was a financial crisis in the late 90s in which Korea's economy kind of tanked. And then they bounced back with a loan from whoever, some international community that I shouldn't even bring up because I don't know what it is. So those guys that were telling me about Korea hadn't been here since pre-Olympics in 1988. So their view of Korea was it was like an old version of what Korea was. And I found that out literally the moment I got here. So we got on a plane, mentally prepared for all these changes, all this third world-esque. They made it seem third world. And we landed in Incheon, man. You got to imagine my surprise when I landed in Incheon, and it's nicer than LAX. And I'm walking through the airport, and I'm just like, man, that's why the rest of the country poor, because they poured all this money into the airport, man. Look how nice this airport is. Then we got on the bus, got to riding out from Incheon to Seoul, and it was just a shocker, man. Like the roads, I heard about all these dirt roads and how there was only one real road that ran through the country, non-existent. And this is years ago. I'm hearing about 1986, but I got here in 2001, and it was nothing like what people had told me. There were a few people, and then I'm talking Korean Americans that had told me it was like this, like they hadn't been here since the 80s. And I just remember being really shocked, really surprised at how advanced things were back then. That was a long time ago. And I remember just looking around and being like, man, these guys lied to me. Like they said it was going to be like this. I realize now that Korea was changing really quickly over time. But that was my first experience, like riding into Seoul and seeing like the jumbotrons on the line. And I'm from like a desert city in Southern California. Nothing's more than like 5 stories downtown. And I'm seeing like high rises on the left and all these tall buildings as I'm riding into Seoul. I'm like, man, this looks just like LA, like better. Like it's just bigger. It's just more massive and more densely populated. So that was my first experience. And then instead of being stationed here in Seoul, where I was like, I gotta live here, I got sent out to Camp Humphreys, which is in Pyeongtaek. And Pyeongtaek, I kind of got the feeling like that when I got out there, I felt a lot better about the stories that people had told me because the remnants were still there. I got out there and this big, huge base in the rice fields just spread out all over, and no buildings out there. Nothing's over two stories tall. If you get out into the rice field, it just smelled like it was a rough smell. I got here in May of 2001. It was summer. It was like harvesting time, or I think it was planting time actually. And it was it smelled real rough out there. We used to do huge runs around the base, like perimeter runs, and you'd get out there just to the far reaches of the base that were just basically surrounded by rice paddies. And, you'd be ready to throw up just because of the smell of all the manure and everything they're using. And it definitely made me realize, okay, Seoul is kind of an anomaly. I didn't realize like big cities in Korea as a whole are an anomaly. But I stayed out there in Pyeongtaek for like 6 months, man. My best friend is stationed here in Seoul. I'm stationed out there in Pyeongtaek. And my best friend Anthony calls me up one day after maybe 2 or 3 months. He's like, dude, you got to come up here. Like, you gotta find a way to get up here because it is for real. Like you won't believe what I've been doing lately. And I was like, yeah, man, you won't believe what I've been doing too. And my little parties down in the Ville is what I was talking about. Like these little towns outside of the bases, they're kind of set up for the soldiers there because you just out in the middle of nowhere. So it's set up for you to just come out there and party and get wasted and dance and drink and fight and argue and have fun, talk. But it's not that's you're kind of like party. It's just an extension of the base almost in those smaller towns around those smaller bases. So so finally I said, okay, let me get up there to Seoul. Came up to Seoul one weekend on Friday night. Went out to Itaewon. That was the thing back then. This is 2001 again. Went out to Itaewon, had a ball out there, and just was like, okay, I'm never staying in Humphreys. I'm never staying in Pyeongtaek as long as I have the chance, the ability to come up here. I got in trouble so many times for coming up here when I wasn't supposed to be up here. But I was just like, yo, man, this is the lick, man. We partying all night. They bring in kettles of soju, and you just stay out. And the city never sleeps. Like, it's literally outside until 9 o'clock in the morning. Go home, go back to the barracks, sleep for like, I don't know, 6-7 hours. Then you get up and come back out and do it again on Saturday night. Mad partying, mad fun, damaging livers, doing everything. Like it was all crazy. And then that was like the first era. After that, we got to hanging out in like Hongdae and Shincheon and just, kind of branching out away from Itaewon. I'm sure there were like ones and twosies that kind of knew to go outside of Itaewon and party out in Seoul back then. But I swear, like, if I talk to Uni, my wife, she's like, you guys were like the first era, like that time frame was the first time, 2001, 2002, 2003 is the first time that people started actually going outside of Itaewon and partying. Because back then, Itaewon was just basically a bigger, better version of the villes that were back out, of those little villages that I mentioned were built for the military in these small bases. It was just bigger and better, and you had like more people there. So, I mean, that was my first couple of years in Korea. And even though I was only supposed to stay for 1 year, when it came time for me to leave, I had the option to stay again or put in a request to stay again. And I did that over and over and over and over again until I had the chance to get out the Army. Then I didn't get out the Army because I had no plan because I've been partying for like 3 years. So, so when I had the chance to actually get out the Army, I was like, oh, I'm not prepared. I'll stay in the Army, but can I stay here? And they were like, yeah, you can stay here. In fact, you can move to Seoul. Actually, I didn't move to Seoul. I moved to Pupyeong. And Pupyeong was the best kept secret in the Army. I'll tell you about that when I go into where I've lived in Korea. But Pupyeong is near Incheon. It's a little further out from Seoul. It was a great place to kind of be because you were still in the big city, but out from under the guise of your command. You didn't have people breathing down your neck all the time. Versus Seoul with the military, it's pretty tough living here. I feel sorry for those guys sometimes, but I did my time. So anyway, and it's changed a lot too. So you have things like curfew and stuff like that. And I guess I'll chime into this right now. A lot of people in the Army will tell you that they don't like it in Korea. What the vast majority of them mean by that is they don't like the way the military functions in Korea. And that's a big distinction because I think most people, when they come over here, they really do like Korea. They have to see Korea through that military lens. And the military is it must be, I've never been in the military anywhere but here. So it must be like drastically different than the way the military functions in even back in the States and even other overseas locations. Like, it's a different animal. And maybe that's why I didn't too much care for the military. To be honest, I didn't hate it. But I got out, put it that way. I love Korea. I love the way things function here. Korea is kind of like that college town you go to. Like came here when I was 19, got comfortable for the next few years, and I was just like, I don't want to leave. So I eventually got out the military and stayed here. And I stayed here and I did a lot of different things. I went from teaching English initially to working on base at the Dragon, at the Dragon Hill Lodge, which is the hotel that's on base here, to working as a GS employee, government employee down south, to resigning from that job and going and working as as an invited contractor. And then eventually, after all those different venues, after all those different hops and all those different changes in status, my contract lapsed and I couldn't finagle myself back into the system to take my old job as a GS. And I ended up having to leave. And if any of you out there fall into that category, or if any of you are trying to make that transition, feel free to hit me up, leave a comment here, or reach out to me on Facebook at our Seoulweavers Facebook group at Seoulweavers. And I think it's actually Facebook/groups/Seoulweavers. Hit me up. Let me know what you want to do. I know there's a few of you in there who want to do the same thing. I can walk you through the process that I went through. But I ended up having to leave, went to Arizona for a year and a half, told my wife, like, yo, okay. By that time, my wife and I were married. We got married in 2000. Oh my God. We got married in 2006, the year I got out of the Army. And we had our child in 2010. And then we left that same year. So my son was 6 months old. Wife was a new mother. We had been married for 5 years, but motherhood was new to her. My mother-in-law, we didn't have her status straight, so she had to stay here. And we picked up our toys and moved to Arizona, and because I got a job offer there. When we went to Arizona, I told my wife, like, hey, look, it's only to go back to reset, because once you get in Korea, your status will kind of like once you get in Korea, you got to keep your visa status straight. And it's the first time I've ever had to juggle visa statuses. Like, it was a nightmare to kind of make sure you're still in country legally when your status at one job like quits, and the next status you got like 30 days to get another job and get some other status that keeps you here. And this whole time I did different things. I was in the reserves, in military that whole time, but that doesn't keep you in Korea. But you have options to be in the reserves and still have access to the benefits of being in the military here, basically the commissary and the PX and U.S. mail, and just all kind of different things. So there's a lot of different things that I had to do. A lot of different things I had to do to stay here, or while I stood here. But when we went back to the States, I told my wife we were just going to be there for a year and a half to reset the status, and then we're going to apply to jobs and come back. And while I said that, and I meant it, I didn't know how true it was. Like, I didn't know for sure that we were going to be able to make it back in like another year, because it takes a year back then. It took a year back then to reset your status. So I told my wife, yeah, we'll be back real soon. But didn't know how I could really make that happen. Next thing you know, year and a half goes by, get a job offer for Korea, and we're right back here in 2012. So we were only gone for a year and a half. And we were back. We left in December of 2010. We were right back here in June of 2012. Still government, still affiliated with the military, working on base at the hospital here. So it was a great experience, going back to the States and kind of seeing what I had been missing all that time, and seeing how things had changed in the 10 years that I'd been gone. But it wasn't all that great living in Arizona, Sierra Vista, Arizona, compared to being used to Seoul. It was a big shock to have like things close at 6 o'clock and you're just out of luck if you didn't have everything in your house, versus Seoul that's open all day, all night. And it was a big shock to be like in the pitch black at night when you look outside and compared to what we see here in Seoul. So it made me realize that I had really fallen in love with Seoul in my time here. So I really did want to come back. And upon return, I don't know what really made me stay. It's a combination of everything I'm mentioning here, but it just seemed to, I don't know. I just seemed to be comfortable here. Even when I got here and I didn't know any Korean, none of the language, had a hard time communicating with people, I still kind of understood like Korean culture. I was quick to understand or grasp the concepts of Korean culture, of Korean mannerisms and things like that. Just the way between the culture and the way things are done here, I just liked it. Korean food, I don't know, everything you could think of. I really did enjoy my time here, and really do enjoy my time here still to this day. I relish my time here. I don't have nightmares, but I kind of look outside, and if I'm feeling really good, if I'm feeling really up, I'll have a down moment where I realize like this is all temporary, man. I'm gonna leave soon. So that's basically what the who, where, why, and what of why I came. Um, yeah, it's a pretty decent. I mean, a pretty extensive story. Uh, and then everybody's story is extensive, but an extensive time here in Korea. I mean, altogether, I think I've got about 15 years here. And if I stay until I turn, I'm 36 now. If I stay until I turn 40, I have spent literally the same amount of time in Korea that I spent in the States. Like life will be split between the two. Um, the funny thing about that, I used to, I'll go into this like in detail later, but the funny thing about that is it makes you a little strange, right? It makes you a little awkward in how you, I'm not sure how you perceive your perception of things because you're looking at it from like two different cultures. I see why Korean Americans struggle sometimes when they come over here. Not all of them, of course, but like Korean Americans that have been in America since they were in middle school, when they come back to Korea, like the whole country expects them to act a certain way and they feel like pressured to either act that way or pressured to rebel against that because that's not what they are anymore. I'm not gonna speak for Korean Americans. That's not right. What I'll do is I'll have somebody that's Korean American on the show to kind of give you that take, and I'll probably and give you their opinion of like the time difference that it makes. Like if you went in high school, you'll be I don't know. We'll get into that later. No need to jump into it now. So that's basically all I wanted to share with you about my experience here. Um, I'm going to go ahead and end the podcast there. Don't forget, the podcast will be chopped up, or I will go in, cut at this point, edit the podcast, put it on Libsyn. So when you see it post on social media, something like that, you think someone could benefit from it if you've heard it already, or if you jumped in and caught this at the end, feel free to check that out. I'll go ahead and put those links in the descriptions of all these different places I'm streaming to now. Uh, so once again, I'd also like to apologize for whatever video you're getting, depending on where you are, or where you're watching. It's it's me. I don't think it's the system. I'm actually using Restream.io. I don't think Restream is the problem. I'm certain it is Will. But we'll jump in. Let me go ahead and jump into the current event show because we've got to talk about a few things. I wonder how this is going to work out. Last time I had audio, it didn't work out too great. But let's just hurry up and get this over with. I don't even want to talk about this too much, but it's got to be done. And so obviously, people have seen this. You've heard about it. I'm certain on multiple times already by now. But we only do the show once a week, so I didn't get a chance to talk about it till now. Donald Trump addressed the UN recently, and he had a few choice words for a lot of people, a lot of countries, quite a few countries. But he chimed in specifically for North Korea. So let's just listen to what he has to say first, and then we'll talk a little bit about it.
And missiles. The United States has great strength and patience. But if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. The United States is ready, willing, and able, but hopefully this will not be necessary. That's what the United Nations is all about. That.
So yeah, man, Donald Trump says, and I mean, now to kind of give him a little bit of credit here, I guess, I don't know really how to respond to this. I don't understand the reasoning or the thought process to go to say what he said there. He said the United States will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea, totally destroy, like the whole country. And I've got a hope in my. There's so many different things that go through my mind regarding this topic or regarding what he said here. First of all, let's get him off there. Um, First of all, how he can't mean that, right? He can't mean destroy the whole country, right? He knows, like I believe he is a simple man, and he uses simple terminology to express what he's thinking. I hope to God he realizes it's more complicated. It's not as simple as simply going in there and destroying the whole country. Like I don't think I don't think he wants to nuke the whole country and kill. Is that how many millions of people are in North Korea? I didn't look at the population. Let's jump in there and check that out real quick. But he can't really mean destroy the entire country. But he said totally destroy. And so it's kind of like, what? Wait, what? North Korean population. I mean, it's just millions of people in North. 25 million. You can't destroy. It's crazy to imagine that he might actually mean destroy the entire country of 25 million people. That can't really be what he's saying, right? But the thing about Trump is he could be. That could be what he means. He can't mean that, right? And so it's crazy that he says this. The idea that he won't go in and specifically while he's talking to the United Nations, like the leader of every nation that's part of that group, is the idea that he couldn't think of another way to simply say destroy this dangerous regime. He pointed out the fact that the regime is basically holding 25 million people hostage in their country by American standards, and I think by any standards, to be completely honest, there's a significant amount of people that are just. He talked about starvation. He talked about murders. He talked about kidnappings. He talked about Kim Jong-un, homicidal behavior to his uncle and his brother, his half brother, Kim Jong-nam, and he just pointed out how these people are being mistreated in this country. So we don't want this regime to have a nuclear weapon. They haven't shown, basically saying they haven't shown the responsibility to obtain a nuclear weapon. But simultaneously, like immediately after, on the opposite side, he goes in and talks about how he just makes an irresponsible statement after pointing out that this country's leadership is irresponsible. I don't know what to think about Donald Trump. I think he's crazy, and I think those people who are still supporting him and not those people who still support him because they're like, well, he was better than the other option. I get what you guys are saying. That's what you think. And I definitely believe that. But there are some people out there who support this man who if the only reason they support him is because of who he is. They don't agree with what he's saying. If other people had said the same thing and it wasn't linked to Donald Trump, if the other people had his positions, they wouldn't agree with him. Like you would not agree with Obama. How badly, I hate this comparison, but how badly would Obama be attacked by the right-wing media if he had said he was going to destroy an entire country? Totally destroy an entire country. That's madness. Like you couldn't think of a more elegant way to put it, even with your short vocabulary. You got people writing your speeches for you, man. This is crazy. And it's crazy to actually watch I've spent, since I was 19 years old, I've watched North Korea leadership talk with reckless speech, right? Reckless dialogue. I've watched them do it from the moment I came over here. And to actually see the U.S. president like on the same level of recklessness is just crazy. It's just like, is this real? How can he even say that? Why would he not fix that? In any case, so that's what's going on with, I think this changes the dynamic with North Korea. I mean, it just makes it more cuckoo, man. It just makes it more crazy. Just everybody's just trying to the attacks are just ridiculous. Hang on one sec. Let me get and while I do this, I do agree that something has to be done. Don't get me wrong. Like something's got to be done about North Korea, right? Like you can't just let them go out testing stuff, testing missiles, testing out. I mean, to a certain extent, sovereign nations have the right to defend themselves, and North Korea is a sovereign nation. But they do tend to do that with the intention of saying that they're going to bomb America. So why wouldn't Trump like flip out about it? But I just expect I would like just a little bit of tact, not a lot, man. Just a little bit of just let me know that you're being, I don't know. Let me know that there's some strategy behind it, not just talking. Because this is either an empty threat, because he can't possibly mean he's going to destroy a whole nation. This is either an empty threat, or it's the truth, or that's his real threat. That's what he's really going to follow through. Either of those don't seem like a good idea to me. So moving on. That's enough Trump bashing. To be completely honest, I think Trump is partially the reason that we hit such a snag in a podcast, because things got so much more serious than I intended in the month of April. And I really just had to die down and kind of, like, I don't know, I had to change things up, man. I had to relax a little bit and get some lighter content, that of which is not like the content that we're going through today. So speaking of the U.S. relationships with North Korea and South Korea being kind of thrown in the middle, you may have heard of this thing called THAAD. And what is it? It's Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Anti-Missile System. And THAAD has caused a big stink in Korea, particularly because China does not want THAAD in the region. And China's had some pretty extensive backlash. They have all but destroyed companies that are in Korean companies that are in China. They went in and kind of took over. I mean, it's communist China. They can do the government can do whatever they want. And so they went in. I've seen a lot of notices about how China is handling this whole thing with THAAD. And part of it is banning like South Korean media. So banning South Korean dramas and K-pop and things like that. Just basically putting their own version of sanctions on South Korea. And it's crazy to hear people say sanctions don't work, but that's basically what China's doing to South Korea. They stopped their tourism. The Chinese tourism in Korea is a big deal. You've heard me mention it. If you happen to catch podcast episodes in the past, you may have heard me mention it. But China they put a ban on travel to Korea. Not so much a ban, but they definitely tightened up the spigot. So Korea's feeling their decision to deploy THAAD pretty intensely. And China, again, that's kind of the big brother in the region. And I guess really China is just, I think the reason China gives North Korea the support that they give, they just want the U.S. kind of out of their sphere of influence. And it's kind of weird the reasons that they give. Like, why are they against THAAD, right? Because I was like, why are they so against it? It's just, but you got North Korea testing missiles like crazy. Why not have like a missile defense system in place? And that's basically what the reasoning has been, I guess, for deploying more versions of THAAD. I don't think there's just one. And there's a lot of different positions on THAAD. Like, some people say it doesn't work, and I asked that question to a few people, and from what's been explained to me, like, it's like that terminal high altitude point. That means that it can intercept missiles that are at a certain altitude, and any missiles fired at South Korea, don't need to hit that altitude to be delivered. So people say it doesn't work, but I don't think the purpose of THAAD is to protect South Korea. And some people say they're being strategically placed in places where they can intercept like missiles that are going to U.S. Army bases, and Korean Army bases are being laid out to dry. They deployed more, so that there's not that many U.S. Army bases. That can't be the reason why. If they're putting them in different places all over the peninsula's not that big. Some of them are going to be able, if they worked, they'd be able to intercept missiles in the area. And so people are saying, since it doesn't work, there's no reason to have it here because it's just causing trouble. But I would argue that Kim Jong-un is not developing nuclear missiles, in order to launch them at South Korea. That just contaminates the area that he wants to come take over. Kim Jong-un still thinks South Korea belongs to him. He ain't gonna nuke it unless he absolutely has to. The point in developing, I may have mentioned this last time, the point in developing his nuclear program is to threaten the U.S. I don't even think he wants to use it. He wants to convince the U.S. that it is too dangerous to stay here and defend North Korea or South Korea and Japan. He wants to convince the U.S. to basically just scare the U.S. out of the region. And I, if he can't launch it, if you have THAAD in the area, then that claim is kind of empty or it's lessened. I don't know how effective THAAD is. Still don't want to test it out like on on an actual live nuclear round that's already been deployed to the states. But that's the point of it. Like like if you nullify that threat of attacks to the U.S. Or a nuclear attack on the U.S., then Kim Jong Un can't scare the U.S. off the peninsula. And so that makes sense to me, but I'm a U.S. military guy. Who other side would I be on? I guess. Obviously, my opinion is kind of I'm not impartial. That's the word I'm looking for. It's tainted. In any case, I think while I was thinking about this the other night, it dawned on me. Like, so China's claim is that the U.S. isn't using THAAD to monitor, as a defensive weapon to shoot down missiles. They're using THAAD to monitor military action. And they are afraid that the U.S. is going to use THAAD to monitor military action in China. That may be a valid claim. I mean, the U.S., would they not, if they had monitoring, would I say that that's beyond the U.S.? That's beneath them. They wouldn't use a weapon or defensive weapon to monitor military action. No, I wouldn't say that. They wouldn't go that far. They are a military, and they're all looking out for their best interest. But what I would say, that what dawned on me this weekend, is if the U.S. can use THAAD to shoot down a North Korean nuclear missile, then they can use it to shoot down a Chinese nuclear missile if things ever got really hot between the U.S. and China. So not only do they nullify, I mean, it's right there, they nullify North Korea's missile program, but they partially nullify China's nuclear missile program. And if it works. So I think that's the real problem. Like, that's the real issue. They don't care if they're monitoring their military action. What are they going to do? China, if they're monitoring ground troops, if China comes down in that peninsula, they got so many people, there ain't going to be nothing that you can do about it if you knew they're coming. But if they can't, if their own nuclear program is threatened, then that makes total sense. Of course, they don't want THAAD here. So that's pretty interesting. Keeping it a little tight, or keeping it a little a little serious for a quick minute. This is a post that was shared on Oink. I should go into Oink at the end of this, man, because Oink is unique in its characteristics. Oink is a Facebook group. That means Oink actually means only in Korea, and Oink itself is a Facebook group on Facebook, obviously, where expats, both here in Korea and some that have left, basically complain about life in Korea. Now, you get some positive posts on there, but positive posts seem to get far less recognition or far less response and interaction than negative posts. And this one right here, this is about I guess the we can see it, Korea's terrifying new alt-right movement. It's being classified as alt-right, and it does have a lot of similarities with alt-right. I wonder what's going on where this alt-right movement is spreading like all across on different, like internationally, man. Like, people just seem to be getting mad at other people. And I mean, this website that this article is about is basically Korean 4chan. I mean, it may have its differences and stuff, but it's basically where people can go on there and say and do and create the most outlandish things that they could think of, and then share it with people and not have any repercussions for their positions. So, I think, like 4chan, there's some people who just like to put hateful, ridiculous, offensive things on the internet. And there's some people that really do believe in what's being talked about there. And what it is here, I mean, this site, this movement, like this misogyny and against hatred of immigrants, women, LGBT community, and, the political left, like, it's not new. Like, it's always been there. And all that, those different things are somehow always associated with North Korean sympathizers. That's a weird thing too, because North Korea like the current North Korea doesn't associate with any of those things. I don't understand where that really comes from. But the interesting thing, the reason this caught my attention, for one, is because of the bathroom murder of a Korean female in Gangnam, maybe 2 years ago now, where I guess a man waited in a bathroom in Gangnam and killed a random female that walked in there after 3 or 4 males had walked in and walked out. And I think he cited his hatred of women as the reason, the motivation for him killing this stranger. And that set off a lot of, wildfire, so to speak, or it set off a lot of conversation about growing misogyny in Korea. And it's kind of weird, man. Well, the reason this stuck out to me also is because it had nearly 30.8 million visits to the site last year, or in August. Just in August, in 1 month, 30.8 million visits. And it's the 24th most popular site in Korea. Wow, that's crazy. So the idea that the movement is growing is is very concerning. I mean, that's a lot of hits. It's really weird to see this in Korea because I don't know, man. Like it seems to be a growing hatred of women among Korean men, which kind of strikes me as weird. Like I think when I watch like the interaction between Korean men and their mothers and Korean men and the women in their family, like the women seem to go through a lot to make them happy. Like my son is spoiled to death, man. My mother-in-law and my wife just shower him whatever he wants. There is a lot of nagging, but he kind of gets whatever he wants no matter what. It's hard. I gotta be the bad guy in the house all the time. And it's not just in my household. I live in an apartment with a lot of mothers, and they all treat their sons pretty much like the same. Like they give them so much love and attention. And I mean, like basically when you're a mother in Korea, like when you have your kids, you almost cut your own life off. They stop calling you by their name. They stop calling you by your name. They start calling you that kid's mom. So like they call my wife Willie Oma, and like almost her whole identity disappears because they put everything into the kids. It's crazy. And to think that those same children, maybe, I don't know, some of those, and I don't want to make this look like it's more people than what it really is. I think this is a big minority in Korea, but it's a minority that's like growing. And I think that to imagine that those same kids grow up just hating women just because they're women, just because they complain about inequality and they disagree that there's inequality among men and women and all kind of things, man. It's just it's kind of a weird occurrence here. When I think about the Korean guys that I met when I first got here, like the Korean men that I met, they were so like respectful and so, I don't know, they were just so different than that. I couldn't imagine it. Like, I wonder what they think when they read stuff like this. Like, I wonder what goes to their mind, because they're older now. And that's another thing, I'm old, but they're older now. I wonder what they see when they look at the news and they see things like this, and what their take on it is. Like, is it the generation? It's just so far removed from what I knew Korea to be when I first got here. I mean, I remember the first Katusas I met were just the most polite, the most soft-spoken, and they didn't seem to have a hateful bone in their body. And they were stuck in there with us. And it was still super cool. It was just the nicest guys I ever met. And to think that there's like polar opposites to them now, I guess that goes across the board. That's not just Korean men. I guess that's for everybody. And I'm sure there's, as nice as I am, there's a short black dude with glasses and dreads somewhere that is just evil. It's just the way people are. People are different. I don't know what it is that's fueling this movement. The article actually does cite like unemployment and things like that, and it talks a little bit like let me read this. I think it's actually put in there, but this is just one post from this website. I'll read it to you. Another post titled "How to Find Out If a Woman is Marriage Material" includes a photo of a man holding a baseball bat. Translated, it roughly reads, "Say whatever you want." Say whatever to your girlfriend, and if she talks back to you in a way you don't like, then beat her, knowing you may wind up in the police station. If you beat her and she still comes back to you, then I think she's the right person to marry. If she goes to the police, then she's not. God, man, that is brutal. That is craziness. And to be honest, this kind of hits close to home because we have a situation. We've got someone in our life who we lost due to she was murdered by her husband, and that was years ago. More on that story. You guys want to hear about that? I'll see if Uni wants to tell that story. No family members or anything like that, but someone that was that she was pretty close to. Um, and then so yeah, there's also anger towards immigrants and the LGBT community, like I mentioned before, and people with disabilities. That's pretty crazy. The site kind of cites that, but that's pretty crazy. It's almost like it's all people who really aren't in the position to fight back or defend themselves. I mean, if you've ever seen, anyway, I mean, it's just all, it's kind of punching down, right? That's basically what it is. But I don't know where, like, again, I'm surprised that it's coming, that where it's coming from. Sometimes I think that there are bigger interests that really just want to divide and conquer people, and they are really influencing. They're really out there influencing this. Like they mentioned that the company that's cited as the owner for the site, it's some company that no one really knows much about. But I wouldn't be surprised to find out that it was a company affiliated with Samsung or LG or one of these big conglomerates that is majorly involved and majorly invested in keeping like the people who don't have the have-nots without, so to speak, like making sure nobody like comes up, making sure nobody comes over to them and kind of supports them going or kind of attacks them about how they don't hire enough people, or how they don't pour enough money back into the economy and so on and so forth. I will one of these days I'll have a conversation about Shea Balls. I'll have someone on who can really kind of give you some input on the conglomerates in Korea and how they handle things, because it's pretty brutal the way you talk about four people at the top of the hill pushing everybody back down. Man, that is the perfect illustration for them. But the site's pretty crazy, man. Watch it. Hopefully it doesn't grow. I'm sure it will. I'm optimistic about some things that I'm not. But on to immigrants, or speaking of immigrants in relation to immigrants, I came across this article. Actually, I do conversational English with a college professor. I may have mentioned that in previous broadcast, but he sent me this article: multicultural students need better mentoring. And this is talking about when they refer to multicultural students in this article, they're referring to children who have at least one parent who is not Korean. And that, you don't see that much of it here in Korea, but it's starting to grow. Like that's starting to happen a lot more, particularly out in the country where like people are basically vacating those country areas and all gravitating towards Seoul and other big cities, Daegu and Daejeon and Busan and things like that. People are moving out of those communities, and you have farmers who are kind of stuck there, and they're taking over their family farm or something along those lines, and they actually can't find wives. They go out of Korea, Vietnam, and the Philippines and Thailand, and they marry women from those other countries and bring them back, and then of course their kids are multicultural. Um, and this is kind of an interesting thing. Like they found out that in those communities, the multicultural communities, it's more important that the teacher be involved than it is that the family members be involved. That's actually in contrast to what it is in the States. Like if the family members are involved, the student's success tends to be higher, versus if the teachers are more involved and the family members aren't, it tends to be lower. That's the opposite here in Korea. They find that even if the family is not that involved, because the family is immigrants or something along those lines, they're out working and making a living and barely making a living and still being in a poverty line. But the children seem to still excel and do well in school if the teacher is more involved. That's pretty important because, quite honestly, I don't know, and I mention this because if you're thinking about if you're a multicultural family like I am, and you're thinking about sending your child off post to school, maybe you should really value the relationship that you have with the teacher. And I think in Western societies, it's not common to like give the teacher presents and stuff like that. But here in Asia, here in Korea, I see, the parents will always do a lot to ensure that the teacher is giving presents on Teachers Day or sometimes lavish presents. I mean, there's no, I don't know. They will spend a lot of time and effort kind of wooing the teachers here in Korea, even when the kids are in like first grade, kindergarten, preschool. Like it starts at a young age. But I would argue, or I'm surprised. I'm not. I wouldn't argue, but I'm surprised that teachers play such a major role in the kids' lives. Because from what I understand, these hagwons, like this hagwon system, this academy system. So kids in Korea, they get sent to school during the day, and in the evening they go to like a whole slew of basically study halls. Like they study more topics, they study other subjects continuously after school. And when I taught English for a brief moment, I had so many students. Like I would have a class at 10:30 at night, and the students would be in like late elementary school, late middle school, and those kids would leave my class at 10:30 or 11 and still be going to another hagwon. Like they'd be going to the violin hagwon or science hagwon or math hagwon. And there was so much being done. There's so much happening in those young kids' lives that is pretty crazy. And I guess because of that system, by the time most kids get in school, they already know all the material. Like they could literally go to sleep and still pass every test because they've been in Hagwon. They spent the last year learning everything that's going to be covered in the school this year. It's pretty crazy. So I was surprised to hear that teachers' involvement was so important, but I would imagine that in multicultural families, it might not be that common to send those children to Hagwons. I'd be curious, or academies. I'd be curious to see how many of them go through that system because that's pretty rigorous. If we don't, we don't send little Will to school off post. We actually send him on post. But if we did, we weren't gonna put him in this Hagwon. We weren't gonna make him a Hagwon student. And basically because it seems like overkill. I mean, they put kids Will's 7 years old, kids his age are in a hagwon until late already. The weird thing about that is your kid is still missing out to a certain degree. All his friends that he's in school with are in hagwons at the school. And so he got nobody to really hang out with. So we ran into that thought process. So we put him in hagwons that we thought would kind of broaden his horizons. I think he goes to a singing hagwon or singing academy and a piano academy, drums. Was he in taekwondo for a little bit? Swimming. He does things like that, but he doesn't go to like math, English, history. I don't know if history is one of them at his age, but yeah, he doesn't go to hagwons like that. It's a pretty crazy thought to think that, hey man, it's got to be tough to be a multicultural student in Korea, I think. Maybe not. Maybe the newer generation. I actually watched this special. I couldn't tell you what it was on, what channel it was on, or who did it. But they were actually going around asking other Korean students. This was 10 years ago, maybe. They were going around, maybe 5 years ago. They were asking Korean elementary school students if their non-Korean classmates were Korean or foreigners. And back then, those elementary school students their answers were they're Korean. They speak Korean. They live in Korea. They never been to India or whatever other country they might come from. So they're Korean. And that was a big turnaround from previously when that same experiment was done or that same study was done. Unfortunately, now some of those guys are on that website trashing women. And lastly, I want to talk about a quick interview that was posted in the Korea Times. I don't know how great of a resource the Korea Times is for these articles. Most of these are in Korea Times, though. I think the one about China wasn't. In any case, this is an article about about English education in Korean schooling and the Korean educational program. If you didn't know, Korea is like in Korean, what's the word? Curriculum. English is mandatory. Like they have to study English. I didn't know they had to. I thought it was like an unspoken rule, but that's actually part of the mandatory classes they have to take. And I forgot this guy's name. What's his name? He's the chief educator And he's saying that he doesn't think English should be required. He thinks that maybe a foreign language should be required, and students should be able to choose. It should be an elective like it is in the U.S. And students should be able to choose whichever language they want to learn. Now he uses some pretty shoddy he uses some somewhat shoddy logic to prove his point. Like he talks about this half Vietnamese kid, multicultural, half Vietnamese kid who's half Korean, half Vietnamese, who can speak English and can speak, or who learned English and can speak Korean, but doesn't know Vietnamese. And he was saying that that's what's wrong. That's the reason we need to make English not a requirement. If this child wanted to take Vietnamese, he should have been able to take Vietnamese. I don't know how great of an argument that is, but he says Korea is becoming more diverse, and they need to learn more languages than just Korean. I would agree with that, but how? Like, who's going to teach those languages? I don't know how that's going to work out, but I will say there is this weird importance placed on English that is too much, I think. Even as someone who taught English for a little while, it's just the focus on English speakers, or the focus on speaking English, particularly in the workplace. Like you have jobs, you have people who work jobs, and this was talked about in a meetup that Chance Dorland from Korea FM had. I don't know, Chance not in Korea anymore; he's in Australia, but he talked about this topic in an event that he had, where they were talking about how English is overvalued in Korea. And you have people who work in an environment where they work at a shipping company. They don't interact with the international shipping aspect. They only interact with domestic cases, I guess, or domestic business, and they're still required to score this certain score on an English proficiency test, just because English is built up as this necessity that they never will even use. And then to top it off, he actually makes a good point and says the manner in which English is taught in Korea doesn't really foster conversation. They approach English, these systems approach English just like they do any other topic. You memorize stuff, but when it comes time to speak to someone, even though their vocabulary is pretty significant, there's no real development of dialogue. And with all that, I think that's a good point. I think other languages should be taught, because why only focus on English? But I think English is an international language, man. I've sat outside with a guy from France, Japan, and Korea, and we were all sitting there speaking English. Or everybody else at the table spoke two or three languages. I'm the only dummy sitting there that only speaks English, but that's the language that we're communicating in. So it's pretty crazy, but I think there needs to be a little bit of focus. Maybe it shouldn't be mandatory though. That's a little crazy. And the stuff that I mentioned about work and things like that, proficiency tests to get to the next position at work, that sounds crazy to me. So there's that. So that's all I got, guys. I don't have any events for you this evening, but I do have something I want to share with you guys. I actually went to an event this past weekend. It was a tour of a brewery, Makgeolli Brewery, out in Dongjin, I think it is. It was pretty awesome, man. And to talk, actually, let me see if I can find a picture of it. It was pretty awesome. And to be completely honest, I've gone from not really being all that interested in Makgeolli brewing to being completely brew bug bit, so to speak. I went and bought a huge steamer. We bought nuduk. We bought all the materials that we need to brew makgeolli, and we're gonna sit down probably tomorrow night and the night after and brew. We're gonna steam some rice, prepare our makgeolli, and brew it in containers. Really had a great time out there for the event. And this is put on by our friends over at the Sewell Company. I'll go ahead and link up their site and their their Facebook page in the description of this. But they really do put on some good stuff, and they know their shit. Seriously, they know what they're talking about. And so you can sit there and watch and their names are Dan and Julia, and they are very, very knowledgeable, and it's pretty impressive because they'll get down to the small details as to why you always see makgeolli stored in plastic bottles versus any other type of bottle, and it's like, man, they really know what they're talking about, dude. It's not only impressive, but it is fun to hang out with them because whenever you're brewing, you're always drinking a fair amount. And if I can find this picture, I can show you what kind of things you end up doing. Um, so we went out there to Dongjin. We also made a stop before we got out there. We also made a stop at a Harmony co-op, like this cooperation between a group of Harmonies. They started a business, and they started like preparing stuff. They started preparing these little rice cakes. I forgot what they're called, but they're little rice cakes that and they started preparing them and selling them like all over the place. Like it's pretty awesome. Like they're shipping things out. They got everybody bringing all the materials to make what they make, and they make more than just the rice cakes. Over, they've started to make things over time. They made this really good, like not anju, but like side dish with those small Japanese plums. They fermented them and put them in like gochujang, and they're freaking delicious. And I don't know, it's just so cool to sit there and watch. Like now that I'm starting to get like into the entrepreneurial side, I guess, of just doing things, just starting to make my own thing. I'm starting to make this transition from careerist to creative. I really love to see people like out doing their own thing with this stuff. And they were pretty inspiring. The old lady there, I mean, it's pretty inspiring to see somebody in their 60s, 70s, like starting a business, particularly a woman in Korea. And it's pretty inspiring to see them like using technology to give a course and like engage with people who like don't speak the same language that they grew up speaking. Like she didn't speak any English, but she definitely was comfortable having foreigners, check out what she's doing. She kept comfortable telling her story to foreigners. It was pretty cool. I think, I don't know, I get inspired by stuff like that. And so that's all really I have to say about them. That she put together a spread that was awesome. I'm going to share all those pictures in Facebook. I can't get to the one that I want to share with you guys right now, but I'm going to share them all on Seoulweaver's Facebook group. So be sure to jump on there, check it out. Join the group if you're not part of the group. It's an open group. You just search for Seoulweavers in Facebook. Man, it really bugs me that I can't get to this. Hey, there we go. Sorry, I'm gonna show you guys in a minute. But yeah, they put together a nice little set, a nice little business out there, despite a lot of opposition. And the methods that she chose to go through to combat that opposition were really good, because she just said, okay, well, we got people that don't really want to support us for one reason or another. Let's go ahead and see how we can get them on our side. And she said, let's go ahead and start doing things for the community. So they started putting things like doing like community outreach, letting people like setting up classes where mothers could come to their office with their kids or to their location with their kids and like learn to make stuff, teach the kids how to cook and things like that, or teach the kids how to prepare certain dishes. When we were there were a bunch of families there preparing like it's grilled sweet potato with like in like some kind of syrup. It was delicious. And they were just really doing their thing out there. It's pretty awesome. And they call it All Me Corporation, I guess. And back to the just to get back to the the actual makgeolli place. This is me at the actual makgeolli brewery in the main office, and what I'm doing is drinking makgeolli through a lotus leaf. Can you guys see that? I don't even know if you can see that. Let me see if I can zoom in on that. That was a new experience. I mean, it was basically like drinking through a funnel, but it was an all natural funnel. It was pretty crazy, man. We had a good time out there. Ran into a few people. Ran into somebody that's actually from where I'm from. Like he's from San Diego, but like we grew up in the same area. That was always pretty cool when you meet somebody like that out here in Korea. That happens more than you would think. I don't know what it is that I'm not sure why, but I mean, the world is just smaller than you think it is. So that's all I got, guys. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. Be sure to join the Soviets Facebook group to check out those links or those pictures that I'm going to share about this trip. I'll be sure to have some. I'll be sure to have a list of events coming up for the weekend in the next rendition of the Seoulweaver show. I think probably what I'll do next time is I'll talk a little bit about like those events that happen like every week. Because when I go out there and I look for events on Facebook and I look for events online, there's just some things that just occur like every weekend. And I would like to share that stuff with you guys. I'm also gonna oil my mic arm because every time I move it around, it does this creaking thing. I don't know if you guys hear that or not, but it drives me crazy. I hear more in my headphones than you guys hear. So that's all I got, guys. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I will be back next week in the Seoulweaver show. Join me here live at 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. Might be a little late, but that, y'all know how I roll. I hope to have the video issues figured out and corrected by that time. So, yeah. Till then, stay in your lace, guys. This has been Will Brooks with the Seoulweaver show, signing off.